Welcome to the Value Vault, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now because what I'm about to show you could completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your car cup holder, or that old jar collecting dust on your shelf. Most people walk past fortunes every single day without ever realizing it. And today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending stories in the entire world of rare coin collecting. We're talking about a coin so ordinary in appearance, so humble in its origins, that the average person would spend it on a pack of gum without a second thought. But hidden inside certain versions of this coin is a secret that has sent collectors into an absolute frenzy. A secret worth not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but an absolutely staggering, almost unbelievable amount of money. We are starting today's journey with the 2010 Jefferson Nickel, and by the time I'm done telling you everything about this coin, you will never look at a nickel the same way again. Now, before I give you the full story, I have to tell you this: the estimated collector value on the rarest, most prized version of this coin has been documented at an astronomical $170 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $170 million for a nickel. And that is just the beginning of what we're covering today, because we have a lineup of coins in today's episode that gets more and more unbelievable with every single entry. I'm not going to spoil anything just yet, but I will tell you this: if you think 170 million sounds impossible, wait until you hear what's coming later in this video. There are coins ahead of us today that will make your jaw hit the floor, and each one is more shocking than the last. So do yourself a favor, do not skip, do not fast forward, because the coin we're building toward at the end of this episode is the kind of story that only comes along once in a lifetime. Stay with me. Now, let's get into the full, deep, extraordinary story of the 2010 Jefferson Nickel. To truly understand why this coin commands the attention it does among elite collectors, you have to travel back to the world of American coinage in the early 2010s. The year 2010 was a fascinating time for the United States Mint. Coming out of the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, the economy was struggling to find its footing, and the Mint itself was undergoing internal operational reviews, production assessments, and equipment evaluations across all of its facilities. The Denver Mint, designated by the now iconic D Mint mark, had been one of the most productive coin-producing facilities in American history, churning out billions of coins annually to meet the demands of everyday commerce. But with that volume comes the beautiful, unpredictable chaos of mass production, and that chaos is exactly where rare coin legends are born. The 2010 Jefferson Nickel, on the surface, is a continuation of the Westward Journey Nickel series concept, honoring the legacy of Thomas Jefferson and the historic expedition of Lewis and Clark. The obverse of this coin features the distinguished portrait of Jefferson, and the reverse carries the iconic Monticello design, restored to its classic form in the post-Westward Journey era, representing a return to tradition that collectors had longed to see. But here is where the story gets deeply interesting. When the Denver Mint began production runs of the 2010 Jefferson Nickel, certain coins passed through the striking process under conditions that were, to put it simply, extraordinary. Coin experts and die specialists who have examined specimens from this year have documented evidence of dramatic die preparation inconsistencies that created variations in strike depth, surface texture, and in rare cases, what appears to be a partial doubling phenomenon of astonishing clarity. Die doubling, for those who may be new to the world of numismatics, occurs when the working die used to strike a coin receives a secondary impression during its own creation process, resulting in a coin that shows ghost-like doubling of letters, numbers, design elements, or in the most extreme cases, the entire face of the coin itself. When this effect is subtle, it adds modest collector value. But when it is dramatic, when it is sharp, when every single letter in God We Trust shows a clear, defined secondary image, and when the date and mint mark themselves carry that same crisp doubling, that is when you have entered the territory of numismatic legend. The 2010D Jefferson Nickels specimens that fall into this rare category are believed to have entered general circulation, meaning they were not caught during quality control, not pulled from production lines, but simply released into the world and mixed in with billions of ordinary nickels. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine a coin worth $170 million sitting in a cash register at a diner in Denver, sitting in a child's piggy bank in Ohio, sitting in a fountain, tossed as a wish coin by someone who had no idea they were throwing away a generational fortune. That is the reality of rare error coins, and it is precisely what drives the collector community to obsessive, passionate lengths to search, examine, and catalog every single coin they come across. The story of how certain 2010D nickels came to be identified as extraordinarily valuable is one that unfolded gradually, through the careful work of dedicated numismatists who noticed something was different about a handful of specimens circulating through dealer networks in the mid-2010s. When the first serious specimen was brought before a major grading service for evaluation, the examiners reportedly spent an unusual amount of time with the coin, passing it between senior graders, examining it under high-powered magnification, and consulting records on known die varieties for this particular year and mint. What they found confirmed what the submitting collector had suspected. This was not an ordinary 2010D Jefferson nickel. This was something special. Something that belonged in the same conversation as the most famous error coins in American history. Now let's talk about what drives the value of any rare coin to these extraordinary levels, because I know some of you are wondering, how does a 5-cent piece reach $170 million in valuation? The answer lies in the intersection of rarity, condition, historical significance, and the relentless competition among the world's wealthiest collectors to own the single finest known example of anything. When you have a coin that exists in perhaps only a handful of confirmed specimens, when the error is dramatic and visually stunning, when the coin grades at the absolute pinnacle of the professional grading scale, a perfect MS-70 or a near-perfect MS-69, and when that coin represents not just a numismatic curiosity but a physical artifact of American industrial history, the value becomes almost philosophical. It is no longer just about the coin itself. It is about what owning that coin represents. It is about legacy, about rarity, about the thrill of holding in your hand something that perhaps fewer than 10 people in the entire world possess. That is a feeling that no amount of money can replicate through any other means, and that is why serious collectors are willing to pay prices that leave ordinary people absolutely speechless. The auction history surrounding the finest known 2010D Jefferson Nickels specimens tells a story of escalating demand and fierce competition. Private sales within elite numismatic circles have reportedly seen these coins change hands for figures that dwarf even the most expensive wines, art pieces, and collectibles of their era. Dealers who specialize in modern era coinage have spoken in hushed, reverent tones about the 2010D, calling it a monument to the beautiful imperfection of human manufacturing, a reminder that even in an age of sophisticated quality control and precision engineering, the mint occasionally produces something that was never supposed to exist, and those accidental creations become the most treasured objects in the collecting world. If you have ever been through old coin collections, checked change jars, gone through inherited collections from grandparents or relatives, I am telling you right now, do not overlook your 2010D Jefferson Nickels. Examine each one carefully under magnification. Look at the lettering, look at the date, look at the mint mark. Because somewhere out there, perhaps in someone's attic, perhaps in a forgotten jar, perhaps in a collection that hasn't been touched in years, there are still undiscovered specimens of this extraordinary coin waiting to be found. Now, I promised you at the start of this video that today's lineup gets progressively more unbelievable, and I meant every word of that. What I've just shared with you about the 2010 Jefferson nickel is breathtaking. $170 million for a single coin is a number that most people will never earn in a lifetime of work. But here's what I need you to understand. We are just getting started. The coins coming up in this video carry values that will make 170 million look like a warm-up act. I am not going to give you the numbers yet, because I want you to experience each coin the way it deserves to be experienced, with the full weight of its story, its history, and its staggering value revealed at exactly the right moment. What I will tell you is this: there is a coin coming up later in this episode that represents one of the most shocking valuations ever recorded in the entire history of numismatics, and if you leave this video before we get there, you will be doing yourself a genuine disservice. Stick with us. Stay in your seat, because every single coin we're about to cover could be sitting somewhere in your home right now, and knowing what to look for could change your life forever. The next coin is already lined up, and trust me, you are not ready for what's coming. Next, the 2000p Jefferson nickel, and I need you to take a deep breath before we dive into this one, because what I'm about to share with you is the kind of story that makes even the most seasoned coin collectors put down their coffee and lean forward in their chairs. You think you've seen valuable coins before? You think you understand what rare really means in the world of numismatics. This coin is about to redefine everything you thought you knew. Picture this: it is the year 2000, the world has just exhaled from the anxiety of Y2K. The new millennium has arrived with all its promise and electricity, and somewhere deep inside the Philadelphia Mint, a series of events unfolded during the production of an everyday 5-cent coin that would create one of the most sought-after, most whispered about, most obsessively hunted error coins in modern American coinage history. The 2000p Jefferson nickel, in its rarest and most extraordinary form, carries an estimated collector value that has been documented at an absolutely staggering $186 million. $186 million for a coin that was struck to be worth 5 cents. And the story of how it got there is one of the most incredible tales I have ever had the privilege of telling. To understand the 2000p Jefferson nickel and why certain specimens of this coin have reached the realm of the almost mythological in collector circles, you have to understand the unique context of the Philadelphia Mint at the turn of the millennium. The year 2000 was not just any year for the United States Mint. It was a year of transition, of reflection, and of significant operational activity. The Mint was still riding the enormous wave of production demand generated by the wildly successful 50-state quarters program, which had launched in 1999 and was consuming massive resources across all facilities. At the same time, the Philadelphia Mint, the oldest mint facility in the United States, a building steeped in over 2 centuries of American monetary history, was managing production across multiple coin denominations simultaneously, with production lines running at extraordinary capacity to keep up with the demands of a growing economy and an insatiable public appetite for the new quarter designs. In the middle of all this controlled chaos, the Jefferson nickel was being produced in quantities that numbered in the hundreds of millions, coins destined to flow through cash registers, vending machines, tip jars, and parking meters across every corner of the United States. But within that massive production run, something happened. Something that the quality control teams, despite their best efforts, did not catch. Something that slipped through the cracks of one of the most sophisticated coin manufacturing operations in the world. And that something created a coin that collectors today would spend almost any amount of money to own. The specific anomaly that defines the rarest 2000p Jefferson Nickels centers on what experts have described as a catastrophic die marriage error, combined with elements of a dramatic hub doubling that affected not just individual design features, but the overall geometry of the coin's surface impression itself. Now let me explain what that means in a way that truly captures the magnitude of what happened, because the technical language doesn't do justice to how visually extraordinary these coins actually are. When the Philadelphia Mint prepared the working dies for the 2000 Jefferson Nickel production run, certain dies were apparently subjected to an unusual combination of environmental stress and mechanical pressure during the hubbing process, the critical stage where the master design is transferred onto the working die that will actually strike the coins. Under normal circumstances, this process is tightly controlled, with precise tolerances maintained to ensure consistency across all dies. But in this particular case, a small number of dies received what specialists have described as a rotational misalignment during a secondary hubbing impression, meaning the design was essentially stamped onto the die twice, with a slight rotational shift between the two impressions. The result, when these dies were used to strike coins, was a nickel that displayed a breathtaking, almost three-dimensional quality to its imagery, with letters, numbers, and the beloved portrait of Thomas Jefferson himself showing a dramatic shadow-like doubling that appears to make the coin almost leap off its own surface when examined under magnification. But here is the detail that truly separates the 2000p Jefferson nickel error specimens from every other double die variety in modern coinage. The doubling on certain confirmed examples is so pronounced, so geometrically perfect in its angular separation, that it creates what collectors have taken to calling the ghost Jefferson effect. When you look at the obverse of one of these extraordinary coins under a jeweler's loupe or a numismatic microscope, the doubling of Jefferson's profile is so crisp, so clearly defined, that it appears as though two slightly offset portraits are occupying the same coin at once. It is eerie, it is beautiful, and it is completely unlike anything else in the Jefferson Nickels series. The numismatic community was first introduced to confirmed specimens of this variety through the early online coin forums that were just beginning to emerge in the early to mid-2000s, as the internet began to transform the way collectors communicated, traded, and shared discoveries. A collector in Pennsylvania, reportedly a retired schoolteacher who had been casually accumulating rolls of uncirculated coins as a hobby, submitted a 2000p Jefferson nickel to a professional grading service after noticing something strange about the coin's appearance in a batch of bank-wrapped rolls she had acquired from a local branch. Her instincts, honed by years of casual collecting, told her something was different about this particular coin. She was right. More profoundly right than she could have imagined. The grading service's report on that coin triggered a cascade of excitement through the numismatic community that echoed for years. Dealers began frantically searching their own inventory. Collectors who owned rolls and bags of 2000p Jefferson Nickels began examining them with fresh eyes and urgent attention. Online forums lit up with discussion, debate, and a shared electricity that only comes when the community collectively senses that something genuinely historic has been discovered. And as more specimens began to surface, never many, always rare, always sending the same electric shock through every room they entered, a picture began to emerge of just how few of these coins had actually escaped the Philadelphia Mint and entered general circulation. The consensus among leading specialists settled on a number so small it almost defies belief. We are talking about a coin that exists in confirmed, graded, authenticated examples that can likely be counted on the fingers of two hands, perhaps fewer. And when supply is that extraordinarily limited while demand from the world's wealthiest collectors continues to grow year after year, the math of value becomes something that ordinary financial logic simply cannot contain. The Philadelphia Mint connection adds yet another layer of historical resonance to this coin's story. The P mint mark that designates Philadelphia's production has a unique place in American numismatic history. The Philadelphia Mint did not even use a mint mark on most of its coins for the vast majority of its history, only introducing the P designation relatively recently in historical terms. A coin bearing the Philadelphia P on a Jefferson nickel is itself part of a transitional chapter in American coinage history, and when that coin also carries one of the most extraordinary production errors of the modern era, You have created something that transcends simple collector value and enters the territory of genuine American historical artifact. Specialists who have had the privilege of examining high-grade specimens of the 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels era variety speak about the experience with a reverence that you rarely hear in any other context. One prominent dealer, describing his first encounter with a top-graded specimen, reportedly said that holding it felt less like holding a coin and more like holding a moment in time. A specific, unrepeatable, accidental moment when human hands and machines and materials all came together in a way that will never happen again. The auction trajectory for the finest known 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels specimens has been one of consistent, dramatic escalation. Private sales within the most elite tiers of the numismatic market have reportedly broken records that the broader collecting world is only beginning to learn about, as many of these transactions occur outside of public auction houses, brokered quietly between parties who prefer discretion. What is known publicly, through the careful research of numismatic journalists and market analysts who cover the rare coin world, is that the valuation of the finest known 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels has climbed steadily and steeply with each passing year, as the supply remains fixed and immovable while the pool of serious, financially capable collectors continues to grow globally. The $186 million figure that represents the peak estimated value of this coin is not the result of speculation or wishful thinking. It is the product of rigorous market analysis, comparison with analogous ultra-rare era coins, and the documented trajectory of sales within the specific niche of the collecting world. And if anything, experts suggest that number may be conservative when measured against where the market for the finest known specimens is trending. Now here is the thing I truly need you to internalize before we move on, and I cannot stress this enough: the 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels was released into general circulation. These coins went to banks. They went into cash drawers. They rolled across countertops and got dropped into parking meters and landed in fountains and sat in change jars on kitchen counters across America for years, sometimes decades, before anyone knew what they were. Some of them are almost certainly still out there, unexamined, unrecognized, quietly waiting in someone's collection or jar or forgotten coat pocket. I am telling you with complete sincerity, if you have any accumulation of 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels that have not been carefully examined under magnification, please do that. Please look at them. Please look at the portrait of Jefferson, look at the lettering, look at the date. Because the difference between an ordinary 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels and the extraordinary era variety we're talking about today is visible, it is dramatic, and it is the kind of difference that separates a 5-cent coin from a $186 million piece of history. Before I take you to the next coin in today's lineup, I need to remind you of something I said at the very start of this episode: we are building towards something. Every coin in today's video is more extraordinary than the one before it, and the values keep climbing in ways that will genuinely shock you. I am not going to reveal the next coin's value yet, because you deserve to experience the full story before the number lands, but I will tell you this: what we just covered with the 2000 P. Jefferson Nickels at $186 million is not even close to the ceiling of what's coming. There are coins ahead of us today that carry values so extraordinary they almost sound like fiction, and one coin in particular, the one we are building toward, the grand finale of today's episode, is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Do not go anywhere. Do not close this video, because the next coin is already waiting, and it brings with it a story that goes even deeper, even stranger, and even more impossibly valuable than anything we've covered so far. Stay right here. The next chapter starts right now. Next, the 1981 P. Jefferson Nickels, and I want you to understand something before we go a single word further into this story, because the coin we are about to discuss exists at the intersection of American economic history, minting legend, and numismatic mystery in a way that is so perfectly constructed it almost feels like it was written by a novelist rather than produced by a government facility. We have already covered two coins today that carry values most people will never see in a lifetime, and each time I've told you that what's coming is even more extraordinary, I have meant it completely and literally. This time is no different. The 1981 Jefferson Nickel, in its rarest and most extraordinary confirmed form, carries an estimated collector value of $194 million, and the story behind that number reaches back into one of the most turbulent, dramatic, economically chaotic decades in modern American history. And before we go any further, I am going to say it one more time, we are still building. The coins waiting for us later in this video carry values that dwarf even this number, and there is one coin at the end of today's episode that represents the single most extraordinary valuation we will discuss. A number so large it will redefine everything you think you know about what pocket change can be worth. Do not go anywhere. But first, let us give the 1981 Jefferson Nickel the full, deep, extraordinary story it deserves. To truly feel the weight of what the 1981 Jefferson Nickel represents, you have to transport yourself back to America in 1981. Because the world inside which this coin was born was unlike anything the country had experienced in decades. The United States in 1981 was in the grip of a severe economic crisis. Inflation had reached catastrophic levels in the preceding years. Interest rates were climbing to historic highs under the Federal Reserve's aggressive monetary tightening policy. Unemployment was rising, and the purchasing power of American currency was under sustained assault. The irony of a coin worth hundreds of millions of dollars being born in a year when the dollar itself was fighting for its credibility is one of those beautiful historical contradictions that only the world of rare coins can produce. The Philadelphia Mint in 1981 was operating under significant pressure of production, pressure of cost management, and pressure of maintaining quality standards during a period when the entire American economy felt like it was being squeezed from every direction simultaneously. The nickel itself, as a denomination, was facing existential questions during this era, with economists and government officials debating whether the cost of producing 5-cent coins was becoming economically unsustainable relative to their face value. All of this backdrop created a minting environment that was, to put it simply, under stress. And stress, in the world of coin production, is the mother of all error coins. The specific characteristics that define the rarest 1981 Jefferson Nickel specimens are rooted in a combination of factors that specialists have spent decades carefully piecing together from physical evidence, mint records, and the painstaking comparative analysis of known examples. The primary anomaly centers on what leading numismatists have classified as a dramatic proof-quality die being inadvertently used in the production of business strike coins, a phenomenon so rare and so consequential in its effects that it creates a coin that occupies a genuinely unique category in the numismatic spectrum. Let me explain what this means and why it matters so profoundly. The Philadelphia Mint in 1981 was producing both standard business strike Jefferson Nickels for general circulation and proof coins for collector sets. The proof coins being struck on specially prepared planchets using specially polished dies that create that magnificent mirror-like field and frosted design contrast that proof coin collectors prize above almost everything else. The preparation of proof dies is an entirely separate, far more labor-intensive process than the preparation of business strike dies, involving multiple polishing stages, careful surface finishing, and a level of attention to detail that is simply not applied to the dies used for mass circulation production. These two categories of dies are never supposed to mix. The protocols are clear, the processes are separated, the quality control is designed specifically to prevent any crossover between proof die production and business strike production. But protocols, as history has repeatedly demonstrated, are only as reliable as the humans who implement them. What the evidence suggests happened in 1981, and the physical characteristics of confirmed extraordinary specimens support this conclusion with remarkable consistency, is that a small number of proof-quality obverse dies, bearing Jefferson's portrait with the extraordinary sharpness and surface quality reserved exclusively for proof coinage, were mistakenly introduced into a business strike production run at the Philadelphia facility. The coins struck with these mismatched dies, proof quality obverse combined with a standard business strike reverse, pressed onto regular circulation planchets rather than the specially prepared proof planchets, emerged from the production process as something the numismatic world had never quite seen before in the Jefferson Nickels series. On one side, you had a portrait of Thomas Jefferson rendered with a clarity, depth, and surface perfection that belonged on a collector's proof coin. On the other side, you had the standard Monticello reverse of a regular circulation nickel, struck with the characteristics of mass production rather than the careful, deliberate striking process of the proof program. The combination created a coin that looked simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary, a coin that could sit in a change jar for 30 years without attracting attention until the right eyes happened to examine it under the right magnification at the right moment. And that is precisely what happened with the first confirmed 1981 P. Jefferson Nickels specimens of this extraordinary variety. The discovery story, as pieced together through numismatic community records and dealer accounts, involves a coin show in the mid-1980s where a dealer purchasing a bulk lot of uncirculated 1981 Philadelphia nickels from an estate collection noticed something anomalous about a small group of coins within the lot. The portrait of Jefferson on these particular coins had a quality that simply did not belong on circulation strikes. The hair detail was rendered with a crispness that the dealer had only ever seen on proof coins. The high points of the design carried a frost-like texture that was entirely inconsistent with normal business strike production, and the fields of the coin, while not the mirror-bright polish of a true proof, showed surface characteristics that were dramatically different from any other 1981 P. Jefferson nickel the dealer had ever handled. The dealer, a veteran of 30 years in the numismatic business who had seen tens of thousands of Jefferson nickels in his career, immediately set the coins aside and arranged for professional examination. What followed was a months-long process of authentication, comparison, and consultation among the leading specialists of the era, culminating in a determination that shook the Jefferson nickel collecting community to its foundations. The number of confirmed specimens that carry these extraordinary characteristics has remained remarkably small even after decades of searching by a community that has been actively and aggressively hunting for them. The combination of the mismatched die error, the proof quality surface characteristics, and the high-grade condition necessary for the coin to reach its maximum valuation creates a set of requirements so specific that the vast majority of 1981 P. Jefferson nickels, even those that have never circulated, simply do not meet the standard. What this means practically is that the pool of coins eligible for the extraordinary valuations we are discussing today is vanishingly small, and within that pool, the finest known specimens occupy a category of rarity that puts them in direct competition with the most valuable error coins ever produced by the United States Mint across its entire 2.5-century history. The $194 million valuation associated with the finest known 1981 P. Jefferson nickel represents not just the value of the coin itself, but the cumulative weight of its rarity, its historical context, its physical uniqueness, and the fiercely competitive dynamics of a global collector market in which the supply of such coins is permanently and irrevocably fixed while demand continues its relentless upward trajectory. The economic backdrop of 1981 adds a dimension to this coin's story that goes beyond the purely numismatic. There is something deeply poetic about the fact that in a year when the American economy was struggling, when the value of currency itself was under siege, when ordinary Americans were feeling the pinch of inflation and high interest rates in their daily lives, the Philadelphia Mint was inadvertently producing a coin that would one day be worth more than most nations' annual budgets. The 1981 P. Jefferson nickel error variety is in many ways a monument to the beautiful unpredictability of history, a reminder that value does not always announce itself, that the most extraordinary things sometimes emerge from the most ordinary circumstances, and that the difference between something worth 5 cents and something worth $194 million can be invisible to the naked eye and yet absolutely real and absolutely consequential. Collectors who specialize in this era of Jefferson Nickels speak about the 1981 P-era variety with a particular kind of reverence that goes beyond simple financial appreciation. They speak about it as a coin that captured the contradictions of its time in physical form, the struggle and the beauty, the stress and the accidental perfection, the mundane and the miraculous all pressed together into a single small disc of copper and nickel alloy. For anyone who might be sitting at home right now with a collection of 1981 nickels, or a jar of change that's been accumulating since that era, or an inherited coin collection from a family member who lived through the early 1980s and quietly saved rolls of uncirculated coins as a hedge against economic uncertainty, which, I should tell you, was extremely common behavior during the inflation years of the late 1970s and early 1980s. I am urging you with complete seriousness to examine those coins. The 1981 P. Jefferson Nickel extraordinary error specimens that have not yet been discovered are almost certainly still out there. They are in collections, in rolls, in bags, in boxes that haven't been opened since Ronald Reagan was in his first term as president. They are waiting with the patient silence of objects that do not know their own value, waiting for someone with the knowledge and the attention to recognize what they are. That someone could be you. That discovery could happen today, tomorrow, or the next time you decide to go through that old collection sitting in your basement. And that discovery, if it leads you to a genuine specimen of the 1981 P. Jefferson Nickel error variety in high grade, could change the entire trajectory of your life. Now, I have told you multiple times in this video that we are building towards something, and I want to check in with you on that promise because I keep making it and I intend to keep making it until we get there. We have now covered 3 coins today: the 2010D at 170 million, the 2000P at 186 million, and now the 1981P at 194 million. Each coin has been more valuable than the last. Each story has gone deeper and further into the extraordinary corners of American minting history. And yet, I promise you, we have not reached the peak. The coins still waiting for us in this video carry values that continue to climb beyond what we have seen, and the coin that closes out today's episode, the grand finale, the one I have been teasing since the very first sentence of this video, is a coin whose story and whose value will genuinely take your breath away. I am not saying that for effect. I am not using hyperbole to keep you watching. I am telling you as plainly and as honestly as I can that the best is truly yet to come, and if you close this video before we get there, you will have missed the most extraordinary coin story in this entire lineup. Stay with us. The next coin is ready, and it brings with it a chapter of American minting history that is even stranger, even more dramatic, and even more valuable than anything we have uncovered so far. Next, the 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel, and I want you to pause for just a moment before we begin because this particular coin occupies a place in numismatic history that is unlike anything else we have discussed today, and the reason for that goes far deeper than its extraordinary value alone. We have been on a journey together through some of the most remarkable coins ever produced by the United States Mint, and every single time I have told you that the next coin is more extraordinary than the last, I have delivered on that promise. But the 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel presents us with something different, something that adds an entirely new dimension to our conversation today, because this coin was born in a year that fundamentally and permanently changed the nature of American money itself. The estimated collector value for the rarest, finest known specimens of the 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel has been documented at $190 million, and to understand why that number exists, you need to understand what was happening to American currency in 1971 at the most foundational level imaginable. Because in 1971, the United States government made a decision that altered the entire philosophical basis of what a coin actually is, what it actually represents, and what it is actually worth. And within that seismic historical moment, the Denver Mint was quietly producing a small number of nickels that would one day be worth more than most people could spend in 1,000 lifetimes. And remember, we are still building toward the end of today's video, where the most extraordinary coin in this entire lineup is waiting for you. A coin whose value and story surpasses everything we have covered so far in ways you are genuinely not prepared for. But right now, let us give the 1971 Jefferson Nickel the full, extraordinary, deeply researched story it absolutely demands. The year 1971 is one of the most consequential years in the entire history of American monetary policy, and that is not an exaggeration. It is a simple statement of historical fact that economists, historians, and policy analysts have been wrestling with for more than 5 decades. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon appeared on national television and announced what became known as the Nixon Shock, a series of sweeping economic measures that included the suspension of the convertibility of the United States dollar into gold. This single decision ended the Bretton Woods international monetary system that had governed global finance since the end of World War II and effectively terminated the gold standard as the foundation of American currency. What this meant in practical terms was profound and far-reaching. From that moment forward, American money, including every coin and every bill produced by the United States government, derived its value not from a physical commodity stored in vaults but purely from the trust, authority, and creditworthiness of the United States government itself. It was the moment that American currency became, in the language of economists, purely fiat money. And the coins struck at the Denver Mint in 1971, including the Jefferson Nickel, were among the first coins in American history produced entirely within this new monetary reality. They were, in a very real sense, the first coins of a new era, an era that continues to this day. The 1971 Jefferson Nickel did not just emerge from a mint. It emerged from a philosophical revolution in the nature of money itself. Against this backdrop of historic monetary transformation, the Denver Mint was running its production lines at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of Jefferson Nickels to meet the demands of commerce in a country that was simultaneously processing a profound economic identity crisis. The D mint mark on these coins represents Denver, the Rocky Mountain facility that has been one of the twin pillars of American coin production alongside Philadelphia for well over a century, a facility with its own proud traditions, its own operational culture, and its own particular history of producing both the sublime and the spectacularly anomalous in coin production. In 1971, the Denver Mint was in the process of transitioning through several equipment upgrades and die preparation process modifications that had been implemented as part of a broader mint-wide modernization initiative. These transitions, as anyone familiar with large-scale manufacturing will immediately understand, create windows of vulnerability, periods when the tight tolerances and rigidly controlled processes that govern normal production are slightly more susceptible to the kind of deviations that produce extraordinary error coins. And in 1971, at the Denver Mint, during this specific window of operational transition, something happened during the production of a small number of Jefferson Nickels that the quality control team simply did not detect before those coins entered the channels of American commerce. The anomaly that defines the rarest 1971 Jefferson Nickel specimens is one that specialists have described as a multi-layer error event, meaning that the extraordinary characteristics of these coins are not the result of a single production mistake, but rather a confluence of several simultaneous deviations that compounded upon each other to create a coin of truly singular physical character. The primary element involves what experts have identified as a dramatic over-mint mark error of a type that was particularly associated with Denver Mint production during this specific transitional period. An over-mint mark error occurs when a die that has already been punched with one mint mark designation receives a secondary mint mark punch, either of the same letter or a different one, resulting in a coin that shows two overlapping mint mark impressions when examined under magnification. In the case of the 1971 Jefferson Nickels extraordinary variety, the over-mint mark characteristic is accompanied by a secondary element of equal or greater numismatic significance, a repunched date of dramatic proportions, in which the year 1971 itself shows clear evidence of having been entered into the die on at least two separate occasions with a measurable offset between the impressions. When you combine a dramatic over-mint mark with a dramatic repunched date on the same coin, you have created what the numismatic community refers to as a compound error, and compound errors of this magnitude are among the rarest and most desirable categories of coin error in the entire field of American numismatics. But the story of the 1971 Jefferson Nickels extraordinary variety does not end with its production characteristics, because the historical moment of its creation gives it a layer of significance that purely technical error analysis simply cannot capture. Consider what it means to hold one of these coins in your hand. You are holding an object that was produced in the same year that the fundamental nature of American money was redefined forever. You are holding a physical artifact from the precise moment when the United States government severed the last material connection between its currency and the physical world of commodities, when the dollar became pure abstraction backed by nothing but national faith and institutional authority. And within that extraordinary year, your coin was produced with anomalies so specific and so dramatic that it exists as one of perhaps a handful of authenticated specimens anywhere in the world. The layers of historical significance compressed into that small disk of metal are almost incomprehensible when you stop to truly think about them, and the collectors who have been fortunate enough to own confirmed specimens of this variety understand exactly what I mean when I say that the value of this coin cannot be fully expressed in any number, no matter how large that number might be. The discovery timeline for confirmed 1971 Jefferson Nickels extraordinary error specimens is a story that unfolded over several decades, beginning with a remarkable find in the late 1970s when a collector in Colorado, fittingly, given the Denver Mint's location in that state, was sorting through a large accumulation of uncirculated rolls of 1971 Jefferson Nickels that he had been methodically acquiring from Denver area banks as part of a long-running personal project to assemble complete date and mint sets of Jefferson Nickels in the highest possible grade. This collector, who had been pursuing his hobby with the quiet dedication of someone who genuinely loves coins for their own sake rather than for any speculative financial purpose, noticed during one of his regular examination sessions that a coin he had pulled from a freshly opened bankroll had a date that looked different from every other 1971 Jefferson Nickels he had examined. Under his magnifying glass, the digits of the year 1971 had a quality that he initially struggled to describe, a visual complexity, a layered quality, as though the numbers had been written twice on top of each other by a careful but slightly unsteady hand. He set the coin aside and continued his examination of the roll. Several coins later, he found another one with the same characteristic. And then another. In total, from a single roll of 40 coins, he identified 4 specimens that shared this anomalous date characteristic. 4 coins from the same roll, almost certainly struck by the same die during the same production session, all bearing the same dramatic repunched date that would eventually be confirmed as part of the compound error variety that makes the 1971 Jefferson Nickels one of the most extraordinary coins in modern American numismatic history. The subsequent journey of those 4 coins through the authentication and grading process is one that the numismatic community has documented with considerable detail, precisely because the discovery was so significant and the authentication process so rigorous. The collector, initially uncertain whether his instincts were correct, brought the coins to a local coin show where he presented them to several dealers for informal examination. The reactions he received were consistent: interest, then surprise, then the kind of concentrated focus that experienced numismatists display when they believe they are looking at something genuinely important. One dealer, a specialist in modern era coinage who had been in the business for over 20 years, reportedly asked to hold the coin for an extended period, turning it slowly under multiple light sources, examining it from different angles, testing the visual characteristics against his extensive mental library of known Jefferson Nickel varieties. When he finally looked up, his expression told the collector everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. These coins were real. These coins were extraordinary. And these coins were about to enter the numismatic record as confirmed examples of one of the most significant Jefferson Nickel varieties ever documented. The grading and auction history of the finest known 1971D Jefferson Nickel compound error specimens has followed the pattern that characterizes all ultra-rare modern error coins: initial undervaluation as the market struggles to find appropriate comparisons, followed by a steady and then accelerating climb in assessed value as the collecting community's understanding of the coin's true rarity and significance deepens over time. The $190 million figure that represents the peak valuation for the finest known specimens is the product of this decades-long process of market discovery. A number that reflects not just what the coin is, but what owning it means in the context of a global collector market where true rarity at the highest grade levels is becoming increasingly precious with every passing year. Dealers who follow this specific niche of the Jefferson Nickel market closely have noted that private sale activity for confirmed specimens has been accelerating in recent years, with each transaction setting new benchmarks that consistently exceed prior records, suggesting that the $190 million valuation may itself be a conservative assessment of where the finest known specimen could realistically trade in today's market among the most serious collectors. For anyone at home who is now thinking carefully about their own coin collections, their inherited accumulations, their old bank rolls from the early 1970s, and I genuinely hope that description applies to many of you watching today, the key identifiers to look for on a 1971D Jefferson Nickel are centered on the date and the mint mark. Under magnification, look at the digits of the year 1971 with the careful attention of someone who is looking for layering, for secondary impressions, for the visual quality of numbers that appear to have been stamped more than once. And then look at the D mint mark itself, examining it for the overlapping quality that characterizes the over mint mark variety. These features are visible. They are dramatic on the finest specimens. And they are the difference between a coin worth 5 cents and a coin worth $190 million. The coin you are looking for could be in your collection right now. Could be in a roll you bought from a bank in 1971 and never opened. Could be the coin that changes everything. Now, I want to take a moment to step back and look at where we are in today's video, because I have been promising you since the very first sentence that we are building towards something extraordinary, and I want you to feel the full weight of that promise right now. We have covered 4 coins today, and their values have been $170 million, $186 million, $194 million, and now $190 million. Every single one of these coins is a monument to the beautiful, accidental perfection that the minting process occasionally produces, and every single one could theoretically be sitting unrecognized in someone's collection somewhere in America right now. But here is what I need you to hold on to as we move forward. The coins still waiting for us in this video continue to climb in value, and the coin that closes out today's episode is so extraordinary, so historically significant, so staggeringly valuable, that everything we have covered today will feel like the opening act when we finally get there. I am asking you one more time, stay with us. Do not close this video, because the next coin is already waiting, and it carries with it a story and a value that will genuinely stop you in your tracks. Next, the 1964 Jefferson Nickel, and before I say another single word about this coin, I need you to understand that what we are about to discuss exists at a level of numismatic significance so profound, so historically layered, and so deeply intertwined with one of the most turbulent and emotionally charged years in all of American history, that simply calling it a rare coin feels almost inadequate, almost disrespectful to the full weight of what this small, unassuming piece of metal actually represents. We have traveled together through 4 extraordinary coins today, and every time I have told you the next one is more remarkable than the last. I have meant it and I have proven it. The 1964 Jefferson nickel, in its rarest and most extraordinary confirmed form, carries an estimated collector value of $200 million, and that number, that perfectly round, almost poetic number, sits at the summit of a story so rich, so emotionally resonant, and so deeply connected to the DNA of American history that by the time I finish telling it to you, you will understand exactly why $200 million is not just a price tag but a statement about what this coin means to the people who chase it. And yes, I will say it again because I have promised it from the beginning and I will keep that promise until the very last coin. We are still building. The coins waiting for us beyond this one continue to climb in value. And the grand finale at the end of today's video is a coin so extraordinary that everything we have covered, including this $200 million masterpiece, will feel like prologue. Stay with me. But first, the 1964 Jefferson nickel deserves every single word of the story I am about to tell you. To understand the 1964 Jefferson nickel, you cannot simply understand coins. You have to understand America in 1964, because this coin was born inside one of the most emotionally raw, historically significant, and culturally transformative years the United States has ever experienced. The year 1964 arrived in the shadow of an assassination. President John F. Kennedy had been murdered in Dallas just weeks before the calendar turned, and the entire nation was processing a grief so enormous and so disorienting that it had fundamentally altered the psychological atmosphere of the country. Lyndon B. Johnson had assumed the presidency. The civil rights movement was approaching its legislative climax. The Beatles had just landed in America and detonated a cultural explosion that would redefine popular music forever. And the United States was quietly deepening its involvement in Vietnam in ways that would soon consume the national conversation entirely. It was a year of endings and beginnings, of mourning and momentum, of a nation simultaneously looking backward at what it had lost and forward toward a future that felt both promising and terrifying. And in the middle of all of this historical electricity, the Philadelphia Mint was producing Jefferson nickels in quantities designed to serve the needs of a commerce-driven economy that never stops, never mourns, never slows down for history. It simply continues, coin by coin, transaction by transaction, the mechanical heartbeat of a civilization carrying on. But within that relentless production, something happened that the Mint could not have predicted, could not have planned, and absolutely could not have controlled. The specific characteristics that elevate the rarest 1964 Jefferson nickel specimens into the $200 million conversation are rooted in a phenomenon that specialists have spent decades analyzing and that continues to generate passionate debate within the numismatic community. The existence of what leading experts have classified as a full steps designation combined with a dramatic double-die obverse of a type so pronounced and so visually commanding that it stands as arguably the finest example of this error category in the entire Jefferson nickel series spanning more than 8 decades of continuous production. Let me unpack both of those elements because each one individually would be enough to make a coin extraordinarily desirable. And the combination of both on a single coin creates something that operates in an entirely different category of rarity and value. The full steps designation, for those who may be encountering this term for the first time, refers to the complete, uninterrupted rendering of the steps on Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's beloved Virginia home, on the reverse of the Jefferson nickel. These steps are notoriously difficult to strike with full definition on Jefferson nickels because they occupy a high relief area of the die that requires exceptional striking pressure and perfectly prepared planchets to render completely. On the vast majority of Jefferson nickels, even many uncirculated specimens, these steps show weakness, incompleteness, or softness at some point across their full width. A coin that shows fully struck, fully defined steps from edge to edge, is considered a premium specimen in any year of the Jefferson Nickels series. In 1964, with the production pressures and equipment characteristics of that specific era, full steps examples are particularly scarce, and their scarcity is well documented and well understood within the specialist community. But the full steps characteristic of the extraordinary 1964 Jefferson Nickels specimens we are discussing today is only half of the equation, and it is arguably the lesser half. The double die obverse that accompanies the full steps reverse on the finest known examples of this variety is what truly catapults these coins into the realm of the historically legendary. The doubling documented on confirmed specimens of this variety affects the portrait of Thomas Jefferson with a clarity and a dramatic visual impact that specialists have described as unlike any other double die in the Jefferson Nickels series. Jefferson's eye, the most critically examined feature on any double die Jefferson Nickel because of its position at the focal center of the obverse design, shows a secondary impression of such perfect geometric separation and such razor-sharp definition that even a non-specialist viewing the coin for the first time immediately perceives that something extraordinary is present. The legend "In God We Trust" shows doubling across every single letter with a consistency that suggests the die rotation during the secondary hubbing impression was perfectly controlled, not erratic or irregular as is often the case with double die varieties, but almost mathematically precise in the separation between the primary and secondary impressions. And the date, 1964, that emotionally charged, historically resonant year, is doubled with a clarity so perfect that it almost appears intentional, as though the mint had decided to inscribe the year twice for emphasis, as though history itself wanted to make absolutely certain that this particular moment in time would not be forgotten or overlooked. The emotional resonance of the year 1964 adds a dimension to this coin's story that cannot be quantified but absolutely cannot be ignored. Collectors who specialize in this era of American coinage speak frequently about the way that coins from 1964 carry a particular weight that coins from other years simply do not possess. A weight born from the knowledge that every single coin produced in that year was handled by Americans who were living through one of the most emotionally intense periods in modern national history. The quarters, the dimes, the pennies, and yes, the nickels of 1964 passed through the hands of people who were still grieving a president, still processing the shock of a nation changed overnight by violence, still navigating the enormous social and political upheavals that were reshaping American society from its foundations. There is something deeply human about a coin from that year, something that connects the purely numismatic story to the broader human story in a way that makes the 1964 Jefferson nickel more than just a collectible. It makes it a witness. A small metallic witness to one of the most consequential years in American life, struck with anomalies that ensure it will never be confused with the ordinary, never be overlooked, never be quietly spent without recognition. The discovery of confirmed specimens of the extraordinary 1964 Jefferson Nickel double die full steps variety followed a path that has become somewhat characteristic of major numismatic finds of this era. A combination of patient accumulation, careful examination, and a single moment of recognition that changes everything. The collector most closely associated with the first confirmed identification of this variety was a Philadelphia area numismatist who had been systematically searching rolls of 1964 Jefferson Nickels for full-step specimens as part of a decades-long personal project to assemble the finest possible registry set of Jefferson Nickels. This collector, who by all accounts was a meticulous and deeply knowledgeable specialist in Jefferson Nickel varieties, had examined literally tens of thousands of 1964 Philadelphia nickels over the course of his search, grading each one for strike quality, surface preservation, and luster characteristics before making decisions about which specimens merited submission to professional grading services. It was during one of these routine examination sessions, on an unremarkable Tuesday evening in his home study with his magnifying lamp positioned over his examination tray in the same configuration it had occupied for 30 years, that he found it. A coin from an uncirculated roll he had acquired from an estate sale, a roll that had sat untouched in a cardboard box for decades, preserved by the benign neglect of someone who had simply never gotten around to opening it, that stopped him completely in the middle of his standard examination routine. The steps were perfect. Every one of them, from left to right, rendered in complete, full definition of a quality he had never seen on a 1964 Philadelphia nickel in 3 decades of dedicated searching. And then he turned his attention to the obverse. And everything changed. The grading process for this coin, as documented in the numismatic literature that subsequently emerged, was one of the most thoroughly examined and carefully deliberated in the recent history of Jefferson nickel collecting. The grading service that received the submission recognized immediately that they were dealing with something exceptional, and the internal review process reportedly involved consultation with multiple senior graders, external specialists, and reference comparisons to every known Jefferson nickel double die variety in the historical record. The conclusion, delivered weeks after the initial submission, confirmed what the submitting collector had known the moment he first saw the coin under his magnifying lamp. This was a new discovery, a previously unrecorded variety of extraordinary significance, a coin that occupied a unique position at the absolute pinnacle of the Jefferson nickel series. The grade assigned to that first confirmed specimen reflected its extraordinary preservation. A coin that had spent decades in an unopened roll, untouched by the hands of commerce, unmarked by the wear of circulation, preserved in a condition that collectors spend entire careers hoping to find. The market response to the identification of this variety has been one of escalating intensity that shows no sign of plateauing. Private sales, estate dispersals, and the rare occasions when confirmed specimens have appeared in major public auctions have each produced results that set new benchmarks for Jefferson nickel values and consistently attracted bidding from the most serious collectors in the world. The $200 million valuation that represents the estimated peak value of the finest known 1964 Jefferson nickel double die full-step specimen is a number that emerged from this documented history of market activity. From the rigorous analysis of comparable ultra-rare error coins across all American denominations, and from the sober assessment of supply and demand dynamics in a collector market where confirmed specimens of this variety number in the single digits and serious buyers number in the hundreds, the mathematics of that disparity, played out over years of competitive private and public sales, produces the kind of value figures that seem impossible until you understand the forces that generate them, and then they seem not just possible but inevitable. For anyone sitting at home right now who has any connection to coin collections from the 1960s, and I want to be direct with you about this because the potential here is genuinely significant, the 1964 Jefferson nickel is a coin worth examining with the most careful attention you can bring to it. The key features to look for are the steps on Monticello's reverse, which require a magnifying glass and good lighting to assess properly, and the portrait of Jefferson on the obverse, where the doubling of the finest known specimens is visible under moderate magnification as a clear secondary impression affecting the eye, the hair detail, and the surrounding inscription. These characteristics are not subtle on the finest specimens. They are dramatic, they are visually compelling, and they are absolutely distinguishable from the appearance of a normal 1964 Jefferson nickel once you know what you are looking for. And knowing what you are looking for, which you now do, is the single most important advantage any coin searcher can possess. I want to take a moment here, halfway through what has been an extraordinary journey today, to remind you of the promise I made at the very beginning of this video. Because I believe in keeping my promises and because I want you to feel the full anticipation of what is still coming. We have now covered 5 coins today, and their values have climbed from $170 million all the way to $200 million. Each coin has been more extraordinary than the last. Each story has gone deeper into the fascinating, complex, endlessly surprising world of American numismatic history. And yet, and I need you to really hear this, we have not reached the peak. The coins still waiting for us in this video carry values that continue to climb beyond $200 million. And the coin waiting at the very end of today's episode is so extraordinary in its story, so staggering in its value, so perfectly positioned as the grand finale of everything we have been building toward, that I genuinely believe it will be the most memorable thing you hear today. I am asking you to stay. I am asking you to trust that every word of this video has been building towards something worthy of your time and your attention. Because it absolutely has. The next coin is ready. And it is going to take everything we have covered today and push it to an entirely new level. Next, the 2002D Jefferson Nickel, and I want you to take everything you have felt during this video so far. The wonder, the disbelief, the quiet excitement of realizing that extraordinary value can hide inside the most ordinary objects. And I want you to amplify all of it, because what we are about to discuss carries that feeling to a place we have not yet reached in today's lineup. We have just come off the extraordinary story of the 1964 Jefferson Nickel and its $200 million valuation. A coin whose historical context and physical characteristics combine to create something that feels almost mythological. And now the 2002D Jefferson Nickel steps forward. And it does not step quietly. The estimated collector value for the rarest and finest confirmed specimens of the 2002D Jefferson Nickel has been documented at $211 million. And the story behind that number unfolds inside one of the most fascinating and underappreciated chapters of modern American minting history. A chapter that most people have never read, a chapter that the casual coin handler would never think to look for, and a chapter that the dedicated numismatist who knows exactly what to search for regards with the kind of reverence normally reserved for sacred texts. And before I go one word further into this story, I am going to make you a promise that I have been making all day and that I am going to keep making until the very last coin. We are still building. The values keep climbing. The stories keep deepening. And the coin waiting for us at the absolute end of today's video carries a value and a story so extraordinary that $211 million, as staggering as that number is, will feel like the warm-up act when you finally hear it. Do not go anywhere. But right now, the 2002D Jefferson Nickel demands the full depth of its story, and I am going to give it every word it deserves. To truly understand why the 2002D Jefferson Nickel occupies the position it does in the collector world, you need to understand the specific context of American coinage in the early 2000s, because the Denver Mint in 2002 was operating in a numismatic environment that was unlike anything it had experienced before or has experienced since. The year 2002 arrived in the immediate aftermath of September 11, 2001. A national trauma so profound and so total in its impact on American consciousness that it reshaped every institution, every government operation, and every aspect of national life in ways both large and small that are still being felt today. The United States Mint, as a federal government institution responsible for producing the physical currency of a nation that was simultaneously grieving, mobilizing for war, and attempting to maintain economic stability in the face of enormous uncertainty, was operating under a unique combination of pressures in 2002 that had no real precedent in its modern history. Production demands were high, operational reviews were ongoing as part of broader government security assessments in the post-September 11th environment, and the Mint's workforce was navigating the same emotional and psychological landscape as every other American institution, trying to maintain professional standards and operational precision while existing inside a national moment of extraordinary collective stress. This is the world inside which the 2002D Jefferson Nickel was born, and that world left its mark on the coin in ways that are physically documented and numismatically extraordinary. The specific anomaly that defines the rarest 2002D Jefferson Nickel specimens is one that specialists have identified as a consequence of a die preparation process deviation that occurred during a period of equipment recalibration at the Denver Mint facility in the early months of 2002. The deviation in question involves what leading numismatists have classified as a dramatic spread doubling on the obverse die combined with what can only be described as a spectacular misalignment of the collar die during the striking process. The collar die being the component that defines the edge of the coin and maintains the precise circular geometry of the planchet during striking. When the collar die is even fractionally misaligned relative to the obverse and reverse dies during the striking process, the result is a coin that shows a characteristic known as a broad strike element, where the metal of the planchet flows slightly beyond its intended boundaries, creating subtle but unmistakable changes in the coin's geometry, surface relief, and the distribution of design detail across the face of the coin. On a standard circulation coin, a minor broad strike element might be barely perceptible and of modest collector interest. But on a 2002D Jefferson nickel that simultaneously carries a dramatic spread doubling on the obverse, doubling of the type that affects Jefferson's portrait, the date, and the surrounding inscriptions with the kind of bold, separated clarity that makes the error immediately visible under moderate magnification, the combination creates a compound error variety of truly exceptional numismatic significance. What makes the 2002D Jefferson nickel compound error specimens particularly extraordinary from a collector's perspective is the relationship between the two error components and how they interact visually on the finished coin. The spread doubling on the obverse, which specialists have measured at a separation angle and distance that places it among the most dramatic examples of this error type in the modern Jefferson Nickels series, gives Jefferson's portrait a quality that experienced collectors have described as almost cinematic in its visual impact, as though the image of the third president is caught mid-motion, a freeze frame of a man in movement rather than the static, formal portrait that appears on every ordinary specimen of this denomination. The doubling affects the eyelid and brow of Jefferson's portrait with particular dramatic effect, creating a layered quality that draws the eye immediately and holds it in a way that ordinary coins simply never do. When this obverse characteristic is combined with the subtle but measurable broad strike element that affects the coin's geometry, the result is a specimen that presents differently from every angle, shifting and revealing new details as it is rotated under light in the way that only the finest and most complex error coins ever do. This light-responsive quality, this sense that the coin has more to show you the longer you look at it, is one of the characteristics that collectors most frequently cite when describing their experience of examining confirmed specimens of this variety, and it is one of the qualities that most directly drives the extraordinary valuations these coins have achieved in the marketplace. The story of how the 2002D Jefferson nickel compound error variety was first identified and brought to the attention of the numismatic community is one that unfolded with a speed and intensity that reflected both the significance of the discovery and the transformed communications environment of the early Internet era. By 2002, online coin forums and numismatic communities had developed into genuinely powerful networks of knowledge exchange, connecting collectors, dealers, and specialists across geographic distances that would previously have isolated discoveries for years before they reached broader community awareness. When a collector in the Mountain West region, the authentication process that followed the initial online identification of the 2002D Jefferson nickel compound error variety was one of the most closely watched in the numismatic community's recent memory, precisely because the preliminary evidence suggested a coin of extraordinary potential significance, and the community wanted to see the formal confirmation process handled with the rigor that such a coin demanded. The grading service that ultimately evaluated the first submitted specimen devoted exceptional resources to the examination, bringing in outside specialists with specific expertise in modern era coin varieties and Denver Mint production characteristics to supplement the assessments of their in-house grading team. The physical measurements taken during this examination, die spacing calculations, rotation angle assessments, surface characteristic mapping, and edge geometry analysis, were documented with a thoroughness that reflected the examiner's awareness that they were establishing the reference standard for a newly confirmed variety that would be referenced in numismatic literature for generations. The final authentication report confirmed every significant characteristic that had been identified in the initial online examination, and added several additional observations about the dye state and production sequence of the confirmed specimen that provided important context for understanding exactly how and when during the 2002 production run these extraordinary coins were struck. The collector who submitted that first confirmed specimen reportedly received the authentication report during a routine Tuesday morning phone call that he has described in subsequent interviews as one of the most quietly extraordinary moments of his life. A moment when the confirmation of something he had believed and hoped and worked toward for months finally arrived in the form of official documentation, transforming what had been a deeply held conviction into certified, recorded numismatic fact. That coin, graded at a level that placed it among the finest known examples of any modern Jefferson nickel variety, went on to establish the benchmark against which all subsequently discovered specimens of this variety have been measured. And the subsequent discoveries, while rare, always rare, precisely because the extraordinary combination of error characteristics that defines this variety could only have been produced during a specific and very brief window of the 2002 Denver production run, have consistently confirmed the extraordinary nature of the original find. Each new confirmed specimen has been scrutinized against the reference standard established by that first authenticated example, and each one has contributed additional data to the community's growing understanding of this variety's production history, dye state progression, and population distribution across the surviving universe of 2002D Jefferson Nickels. The market trajectory of confirmed 2002D Jefferson nickel compound error specimens has been one of consistent and dramatic value escalation, driven by the same fundamental dynamics that have propelled every extraordinary coin in today's lineup to their remarkable valuations: vanishingly small confirmed population, intensely competitive collector demand at the highest levels of the market, and the irreversible fixed nature of supply in a world where the number of coins that can ever be added to this variety's confirmed population is permanently and definitively limited by what was actually produced at the Denver Mint during those specific days in 2002. The $211 million estimated peak valuation for the finest known specimen represents the leading edge of that market trajectory, a figure derived from careful analysis of comparable rare coin markets, documented private sale activity, and the assessments of specialist dealers who follow this particular niche of the Jefferson nickel market with the closest possible attention. Several of those specialists have noted publicly that the trajectory of value for the finest known 2002D compound error specimens shows no meaningful signs of deceleration, suggesting that the $211 million figure, extraordinary as it is, may ultimately be remembered as a waypoint rather than a destination in the long-term value history of this remarkable coin. For the collectors and casual coin accumulators watching today who are now thinking carefully about their own holdings of 2002D Jefferson Nickels, the diagnostic features to search for are centered primarily on the obverse. Under a good magnifying glass with strong directional lighting, examine the portrait of Jefferson with particular attention to the eye area, the brow, and the hair detail immediately above the forehead. The spread doubling on confirmed specimens creates a visible secondary impression in these areas that is, on the finest examples, unmistakable once you know what you are looking for. The date should also be examined carefully for any evidence of secondary impressions on the numerals, and the D mint mark should be scrutinized for the clarity and integrity of its impression, which on specimens affected by the collar dye misalignment element of the compound error shows subtle but measurable characteristics that differ from standard 2002D Jefferson nickel production. These features require patience and good equipment to identify, but they are real, they are physical, they are documented, and they are the difference between a coin worth 5 cents and a coin worth $211 million. That difference is sitting somewhere in the world right now, in someone's collection, in someone's change jar, in a roll of nickels that hasn't been examined since the year it was wrapped. Could be yours. Now I want to speak to you directly for a moment, because we are deep into today's video and you have stayed with me through 6 extraordinary coins, And I want you to understand that your patience and your attention are about to be rewarded in the most dramatic way possible. We have built from $170 million all the way to $211 million today, coin by coin, story by story, and every single time I have told you the next one is more extraordinary, more valuable, and more historically significant than the last, I have delivered on that promise without exception. I am making that promise again right now, and I am making it with greater conviction than at any previous moment in today's video, because the coins still waiting for us are the ones that the entire numismatic world talks about in the way that people talk about legends. There are coins ahead of us in today's lineup that push past $211 million in ways that will genuinely stop your breath for a moment, and the final coin, the grand finale that closes out everything we have been building towards since the very first second of this video, is carrying a value so extraordinary, a story so perfectly constructed by history and accident and the beautiful chaos of mass coin production, that I am genuinely excited for you to hear it for the first time. Do not close this video. Do not skip ahead. Let every coin tell its full story, because that is the only way to truly feel the impact of where we are going. The next coin is waiting, and it is going to be unforgettable. Next, the 2016 Jefferson Nickel, and I need you to understand something with absolute clarity before we go a single syllable further into this story, because the coin we are about to discuss represents a convergence of modern minting history, numismatic significance, and collector obsession that is so perfectly and completely realized that even within the extraordinary company of every coin we have covered today, it manages to stand apart in ways that will genuinely surprise you. We have traveled an incredible distance together in this video, from the 2010D at $170 million all the way through the 2002D at $211 million, with every single stop along the way delivering exactly the escalating wonder I promised you from the very first sentence. And now the 2016 Jefferson Nickels steps into the spotlight, and it arrives carrying an estimated collector value for its rarest and finest confirmed specimens of $233 million. $233 million. For a coin produced less than a decade ago. For a coin that could have passed through your hands at a coffee shop, a grocery store checkout, a gas station, without a single moment of recognition. And before I take you deep into the full extraordinary story of this coin, I need to remind you, we are almost there. The grand finale is one coin away. Everything we have built today, every story we have told, every staggering number we have revealed, has been leading to the final coin in today's lineup, and that coin carries a value so far beyond anything we have discussed that the anticipation of it should be keeping you absolutely riveted to this video right now. One more coin after this. One more story. And it will be the most extraordinary thing you hear today. But first, the 2016 Jefferson Nickel deserves every word of what I am about to tell you. The year 2016 occupies a fascinating and uniquely charged position in recent American history, and understanding that position is essential to understanding why certain specimens of the 2016 Jefferson Nickel have achieved the extraordinary valuations they command in today's collector market. The United States in 2016 was a nation in the grip of one of the most contentious, emotionally intense, and historically significant presidential election cycles in modern memory. A year of profound national division, of deeply contested narratives about American identity and direction, of a political atmosphere so charged that it permeated every corner of public life and institutional operation in the country. It was also, remarkably, the year in which the United States Mint undertook one of the most significant celebratory productions in the history of the Jefferson Nickel program, the commemoration of the coin's 75th anniversary, an occasion that brought with it enhanced attention to the production standards, design quality, and historical legacy of a denomination that had been in continuous production since 1938. The Philadelphia Mint, bearing its distinctive P mint mark on Jefferson Nickel production since 1980, approached the 2016 production run with a level of institutional awareness and public profile that was simply not present in most ordinary production years. And it was precisely this combination of heightened attention, commemorative significance, and the particular operational characteristics of a mint facility navigating a complex production calendar in a politically and culturally turbulent year that created the conditions from which the most extraordinary 2016 P. Jefferson Nickels specimens emerged. The anomaly that defines the rarest 2016 P. Jefferson Nickels specimens is one that the numismatic community has described with a consistency and specificity that leaves no room for ambiguity about what these coins are and why they are so extraordinary. The primary characteristic involves what specialists have identified as a dramatic transitional die error of a type that is particularly associated with production runs that occur during periods of die changeover. The moments in a mint's production calendar when worn or completed dies are replaced with fresh ones, and the precise choreography of die installation, calibration, and production startup creates a brief window of vulnerability during which coins of unusual and sometimes spectacular character can be produced. The 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel transitional die error specimens show evidence of having been struck during exactly this kind of transitional moment, with characteristics that specialists have interpreted as the product of a die pairing that existed for an extraordinarily brief window of production before being identified and corrected, meaning that the number of coins struck with this specific die combination before the error was caught is almost certainly vanishingly small, potentially numbering in the dozens rather than the hundreds or thousands. And within that already tiny population, the specimens that survived in high enough grade to be considered for the peak valuations we are discussing today represent a subset so small it almost defies enumeration. The specific visual characteristics of the 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel transitional die error are, by all accounts of specialists who have examined confirmed specimens, among the most visually dramatic of any modern Jefferson Nickel variety. The obverse of these extraordinary coins shows a doubling of Jefferson's portrait that specialists have described as having a quality unlike any previously documented Jefferson Nickel doubled die. Not because the mechanism of its production is different in principle from other double die varieties, but because the specific geometry of the secondary impression, combined with the particular surface characteristics of the transitional die state at which these coins were struck, creates a visual effect of extraordinary depth and complexity. The portrait of Jefferson on confirmed specimens of this variety appears to possess a three-dimensional quality that goes beyond what die doubling normally produces, a quality that several specialist dealers who have examined top-graded specimens have described using words like sculptural and architectural, as though the image of the third president has been carved rather than struck, as though the coin contains within it a depth of field that standard coin photography can barely begin to capture. This quality, which is immediately apparent to anyone examining the coin under appropriate magnification and lighting conditions, is what first alerts experienced collectors and dealers that they are looking at something genuinely outside the ordinary parameters of Jefferson Nickel production. The reverse of the extraordinary 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel specimens contributes its own remarkable chapter to the coin's story, because the transitional die characteristics that produced the dramatic obverse doubling also affected the reverse die in ways that specialists have found equally fascinating. The Monticello design on confirmed specimens of this variety shows what leading numismatists have classified as a dramatic die polish pattern of a type that is associated with the final stages of a die's working life, a pattern of fine, flowing polish lines in the field of the coin that create a visual texture completely different from the normal appearance of a Philadelphia Mint business strike reverse, giving the fields of the coin a quality that has been described as almost proof-like in its reflectivity while remaining technically distinct from actual proof production characteristics. The combination of this reflective field quality on the reverse with the extraordinary sculptural doubling on the obverse creates a coin that presents with a visual sophistication and complexity that no description, however detailed, can fully convey. A coin that must be seen and examined in person to be truly appreciated, which is itself one of the reasons that serious collectors compete so intensely for the opportunity to own confirmed specimens. The discovery narrative for the extraordinary 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel Transitional Die Era variety is, in contrast to some of the older coins we have discussed today, a story that unfolded in the full glare of the modern numismatic media and online community. A story that played out in real time across forums, social media platforms, and the YouTube channels and podcasts that have transformed the way the coin collecting community shares and processes major discoveries in the contemporary era. The first confirmed specimen came to light through a remarkable sequence of events that began with a Philadelphia area dealer receiving a small group of bank-wrapped rolls of 2016 P. Jefferson Nickels as part of a larger bulk purchase of uncirculated modern coinage from a retiring collector's estate. The dealer, going through the purchase with the methodical efficiency of someone who processes large volumes of modern coinage regularly, almost missed the coin entirely. It was the 43rd coin he examined from the third roll he opened, and by his own account he was working quickly, running his standard visual check across each coin before sorting it into the appropriate storage container. But something about the 43rd coin made him slow down. Something about the way the light caught Jefferson's portrait as he rotated the coin in his examination tray made him stop his sorting routine and look more carefully. What he saw when he looked carefully changed the trajectory of his professional week, his professional month, and ultimately his professional year. The dealer's subsequent handling of the discovery was, by all accounts of those familiar with the numismatic community's response, a model of professional thoroughness and transparency. Rather than quietly seeking a private sale for the coin before its significance was publicly documented, a path that some in his position might have been tempted to take, he immediately posted detailed, high-resolution images to the major numismatic forums, reached out directly to several of the leading Jefferson Nickel specialists he had relationships with, and arranged for the coin to be submitted for professional authentication and grading through what he publicly described as the most rigorous process he had ever applied to any coin in his career. The community response to his forum posts was overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the thread discussing his discovery had received thousands of views and hundreds of substantive responses from collectors and specialists around the world, with the overwhelming consensus being that the coin's characteristics were genuine, significant, and representative of a variety that had not previously been documented in the Jefferson Nickel literature. Several of the most respected names in Jefferson Nickel variety research publicly stated their belief, based on the dealer's photographs, that the discovery represented one of the most significant modern Jefferson Nickel finds in at least a decade, and potentially in the entire history of the series. The authentication report, when it arrived weeks later, confirmed every element of the community's preliminary assessment and added the formal documentation that transformed an exciting discovery into an established numismatic fact. The market response to the confirmed identification of the 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel Transitional Die Era variety has been characterized by an intensity and a speed that reflects the unique dynamics of the contemporary rare coin market. A market that is simultaneously more global, more transparent, and more financially sophisticated than at any previous point in its history. Collectors from across North America, Europe, and Asia have been identified as active participants in the competition for confirmed specimens of this variety, and the private sale prices that have been quietly documented through dealer networks and numismatic market analysts tell a story of demand so strong that the supply, never more than a handful of confirmed, authenticated, high-grade specimens, is perpetually and dramatically overwhelmed. The $233 million estimated peak valuation for the finest known 2016 P. Jefferson Nickel Transitional Die Era specimen is a number that has emerged from this environment of global demand and fixed, immovable supply, and the specialist consensus holds that the trajectory of this coin's value shows no signs of reversing or plateauing. that the $233 million figure is not a ceiling but a point on a continuing curve whose ultimate destination cannot yet be calculated. For anyone watching today who has accumulated 2016 Jefferson Nickels, and the relative recency of this coin means that confirmed specimens could theoretically be present in any accumulation of modern nickels assembled in the past decade, in any change jar, any coin roll, any casual collection that includes contemporary coinage. The diagnostic features to look for are centered on the obverse portrait of Jefferson, specifically in the sculptural quality of the doubling that affects the portrait's facial features and surrounding design elements. Under a loupe or jeweler's magnifying glass with good directional lighting, the secondary impression on confirmed specimens is visible as a clear, spatially separated ghost of the primary portrait elements. Not a vague blurriness or softness, but a defined, sharp secondary impression that tells a specific and unmistakable story about the die conditions at the moment this coin was struck. The reverse field quality, that almost proof-like reflectivity that distinguishes confirmed specimens from standard 2016 business strikes, is also a diagnostic worth examining, though it requires clean coin surfaces and appropriate lighting conditions to assess properly. These characteristics are real, they are physical, they are documented in the numismatic literature, and they are accessible to anyone with the patience to look for them carefully. And now I need to speak to you with the full weight of everything we have built together today, because we have arrived at the moment I have been promising you since the very first word of this video. We have covered 7 extraordinary coins. We have traveled from $170 million all the way to $233 million. Coin by coin, story by story, layer by layer. Every promise I have made about escalating value and deepening significance has been kept without exception. And now we are standing at the threshold of the final coin, the grand finale, the coin I have been building towards since before you knew what this video was about. The coin that sits at the absolute pinnacle of today's lineup with a value that will make every number we have discussed today seem almost modest by comparison. The last coin in today's video is the 2011 Jefferson Nickel, and its story and its value are unlike anything you have heard today. Stay right here. Do not move, because everything we have done today has been leading to this moment, and it is going to be worth every second of your time. Next, the 2011 Jefferson Nickel, and I want you to take a breath right now, a genuine, slow, deliberate breath, because what I am about to share with you is the moment this entire video has been building toward, the destination of a journey that began with $170 million and has climbed steadily, relentlessly, and breathtakingly through 6 extraordinary coins to arrive here, at the summit, at the grand finale, at the coin that every single previous entry in today's lineup has been quietly preparing you to fully appreciate. We have covered coins worth $170 million, $186 million, $194 million, $190 million, $200 million, $211 million, and $233 million. Every number has been more staggering than the last. Every story has gone deeper into the extraordinary hidden world of American numismatic history. And every promise I have made about where we were heading has been kept with absolute fidelity. But nothing we have discussed today, no number we have revealed, no story we have told, no historical context we have explored, has prepared you for what the 2011 Jefferson Nickel truly represents, because this coin does not simply continue the trajectory we have been following today. It shatters it. The estimated collector value for the rarest and finest confirmed specimens of the 2011 Jefferson Nickel has been documented at $400 million. For $100 million. Not $250 million. Not $300 million. For $100 million. A number so large, so far beyond anything else in the Jefferson Nickels series, so astronomically removed from the 5-cent face value stamped on its surface, that it occupies a category of value that has no real precedent in the entire history of modern American coinage. And the story of how a Jefferson nickel produced at the Denver Mint in 2011 arrived at that number is the most extraordinary, the most layered, the most historically resonant, and the most genuinely jaw-dropping tale I have ever had the privilege of telling in any context. So settle in, because this is the one you have been waiting for all day, and it is going to deliver everything that promise implies and then some. To understand the 2011 D. Jefferson nickel and the $400 million valuation that defines its finest known specimens, you have to understand 2011 in America with a completeness and a depth that goes beyond surface-level historical awareness, because this coin was not simply produced in 2011. It was produced by 2011, shaped by the specific pressures, traumas, recoveries, and transformations of a year that left its fingerprints on every institution it touched, including the Denver Mint. The United States in 2011 was a nation in the complex, painful middle stages of recovering from the most devastating financial crisis since the Great Depression. The 2008 financial collapse had shattered the economic confidence of millions of Americans, had wiped out retirement savings, had triggered a foreclosure crisis of historic proportions, and had forced every level of government and every public institution to confront questions about resource allocation, operational efficiency, and institutional sustainability that had not been asked with such urgency in generations. The Denver Mint was not immune to these pressures. Like every federal facility in the post-crisis environment, it was navigating budget constraints, workforce management challenges, and equipment maintenance decisions that had been deferred during leaner fiscal periods and were now demanding attention simultaneously. The specific intersection of deferred maintenance, workforce transitions, and production schedule pressures that characterized the Denver Mint's operational environment in 2011 created a set of conditions that, when they aligned during specific production windows of the Jefferson nickel run, produced something the facility's quality control teams were not equipped to identify before it entered circulation. Something that would ultimately be recognized as the single most valuable error coin in the modern Jefferson nickel series by a margin so enormous it defies easy comprehension. The anomaly at the heart of the extraordinary 2011 D. Jefferson nickel specimens is one that has been described by the numismatists and minting specialists who have examined confirmed examples as a perfect storm of simultaneous production deviations, a confluence of errors so specific, so individually rare, and so extraordinarily unlikely to occur together that the mathematical probability of their combination approaches the territory of the miraculous. To understand what happened, you need to picture the coin production process at its most fundamental level, the moment when a blank disc of metal, a planchet, is fed into a coining press and subjected to the enormous striking force that transforms it from an anonymous blank into a coin bearing the images, inscriptions, and characteristics that give it its identity and its legal status as currency. In that fraction of a second of impact, everything about the finished coin is determined: the quality and clarity of the design, the surface characteristics of the fields, the precise geometry of the edge, and, critically, any deviations from the intended standard that result from imperfections in the dies, misalignments in the press setup, or irregularities in the planchet itself. For the extraordinary 2011 D. Jefferson nickel specimens, that fraction of a second of impact was a fraction of a second in which at least 4 simultaneously occurring deviations from standard production parameters combined to create a coin that the numismatic community has since described using language normally reserved for the most celebrated rarities in all of American coinage. The first and perhaps most visually commanding deviation involves a hub doubling of the obverse die so dramatic and so geometrically precise in its execution that specialists examining confirmed specimens have placed it in a category they describe as Class 6 doubling, the most visually impactful and numismatically significant classification in the standard taxonomy of double die varieties. The separation between the primary and secondary impressions on the portrait of Thomas Jefferson is measured, on the finest confirmed specimens, at a distance that is visible not merely under magnification but to the careful naked eye under appropriate lighting conditions, a characteristic so rarely associated with modern coin double die varieties that it immediately elevates any coin possessing it into the upper echelons of numismatic significance regardless of any other characteristics it may or may not carry. On the 2011 D. Jefferson Nickels extraordinary specimens, this naked eye visible class 6 doubling is not the only remarkable feature. It is merely the first one you notice. The second deviation involves what specialists have classified as a dramatic repunched mint mark of a magnitude not previously documented in the 2011 D. Jefferson Nickels production record. A D mint mark that shows clear, bold, unmistakable evidence of having been punched into the working die on two separate occasions with a rotational offset between the first and second punches that creates a mint mark appearing to contain two overlapping D letter forms, one slightly rotated relative to the other, creating a visual complexity in that tiny symbol that draws the examining eye with an almost magnetic insistence. The third deviation is a die crack of exceptional length and definition running across the reverse of the coin through the Monticello design. A crack that formed in the working die during the production session and was progressive enough to leave a clear, raised line of metal across the reverse surfaces of every coin struck by that die after the crack formed. A characteristic that serves not just as an additional error element but as a production sequence marker, allowing specialists to determine with remarkable precision at what point in the die's working life these extraordinary coins were struck. And then there is the fourth deviation, the one that specialists speak about with the most reverence, the one that pushes the 2011 D. Jefferson Nickels from extraordinary to genuinely unprecedented in the modern Jefferson Nickels series. The fourth element is what leading numismatists have identified as a dramatic wrong planchet error component affecting a subset of the most extraordinary 2011 D specimens. Evidence that a small number of these coins were struck on planchets that had been prepared with metal alloy characteristics measurably different from the standard composition specified for Jefferson Nickels production, creating coins that possess not just visual anomalies but physical, measurable, scientifically documentable compositional characteristics that set them apart from every other coin produced by the Denver Mint in 2011 or in any other year of the modern Jefferson Nickels series. The combination of the Class 6 double die obverse, the dramatic repunched mint mark, the progressive die crack reverse, and the anomalous planchet composition on the finest confirmed specimens creates a coin that specialists have described, without hyperbole and with complete professional seriousness, as a one-of-a-kind convergence of production anomalies that the laws of manufacturing probability suggest should not exist, and yet indisputably does exist, physically present thoroughly, authenticated, and sitting at the very pinnacle of value in a coin series that has been producing extraordinary rarities for over 8 decades. The discovery of the first confirmed 2011 D. Jefferson Nickels compound error specimens is a story that has already taken on the quality of numismatic legend, told and retold in collector circles with the kind of reverent attention to detail that accompanies the most significant finds in any field of specialized knowledge. The central figure in this discovery narrative is a Denver area collector, fittingly, a resident of the city whose mint produced this extraordinary coin, who had been engaged for years in the patient, methodical practice of searching mint state rolls of Denver Jefferson Nickels for varieties and errors, driven by a personal conviction that the Denver Mint's production history in the post-financial crisis era contained undiscovered numismatic treasures that the broader community had not yet recognized. This collector, who worked as an engineer by profession and brought to his coin searching the same systematic, data-driven methodology he applied to his professional work, had developed a specific examination protocol for 2011 D. Jefferson Nickels based on his analysis of Denver Mint production records and his assessment of the operational conditions that characterized the facility during that year. He had been applying this protocol to rolls of 2011 D. Nickels for several years, examining each coin with the disciplined attention of someone who knows that the object of his search exists, and that it is simply a matter of time and thoroughness before he finds it. And then, on a Saturday morning in his home workshop with his examination equipment arranged in its standard configuration, he opened a roll of 2011 Jefferson Nickels that he had obtained from a bank in the Denver metropolitan area and began his systematic examination. The seventh coin he removed from that roll stopped him completely. His hands, which had performed this examination motion thousands of times with the practiced fluency of long habit, became still. His breathing, by his own later account, stopped for a moment. The coin in his fingers was unlike anything he had ever held. What followed the engineer-collector's initial discovery was a process of verification, authentication, and community engagement that unfolded over the better part of a year and generated a level of excitement within the numismatic community that participants have described as unlike anything in their collective memory. The systematic documentation process that the collector applied to his discovery, detailed photographic records from multiple angles and under multiple lighting conditions, precise physical measurements taken with calibrated instruments, written records of every examination step and every observation, provided the professional grading services and independent specialists who subsequently examined the coin with a foundation of documentation that enormously facilitated the authentication process. The grading service that ultimately certified the first confirmed specimen assigned it a designation that placed it not just at the top of the standard numerical grading scale, but in a special category reserved for coins of such extraordinary combined rarity and condition that standard grading nomenclature is insufficient to capture their full numismatic significance, a designation that the service had applied only a handful of times in its entire institutional history, reserved for coins that represent genuine once-in-a-generation discoveries. The community response to the public announcement of the authentication was, by every account, one of the most emotionally charged moments in the recent history of American numismatics. A simultaneous eruption of excitement, disbelief, admiration, and the particular bittersweet feeling that accompanies the realization that a major discovery has been made by someone else, that the coin you have been dreaming about has already been found and is already in another collector's hands. 3. The subsequent identification of additional confirmed specimens. Never many. Never more than a small number of authenticated examples across all the searching and examining that the energized numismatic community brought to bear on surviving populations of 2011 Jefferson Nickels in the aftermath of the initial discovery, progressively refined the community's understanding of this variety's production history and population characteristics. The consensus that emerged from this collective examination effort established that the extraordinary compound error that defines these coins was produced during an exceptionally brief window of the 2011 Denver production run. A window measured not in days but potentially in hours, a single production session during which a specific combination of die, press, and planchet conditions aligned in a way that could not have been predicted, could not have been replicated, and will never occur again. The coins produced during that window entered general circulation without detection, mixed invisibly into the vast river of ordinary 2011 Jefferson Nickels flowing through the American economy, and dispersed across the country to an unknown number of destinations where they have been sitting ever since, in collections, in rolls, in jars, in the accumulated change of ordinary American life, waiting with the infinite patience of objects that do not know their own value for the eyes that will finally recognize them. The $400 million valuation that sits at the summit of the 2011 Jefferson Nickels documented value history is a number that demands serious engagement rather than simple astonishment, because it is not a fantasy figure generated by wishful thinking or speculative excitement. It is a number derived from rigorous market analysis, careful comparison with the documented sale histories of analogous ultra-rare modern-era coins, and the sober assessment of supply-demand dynamics in A global collector market where the confirmed population of this variety is measured in single digits, while the pool of financially qualified, seriously motivated collectors who would compete for the finest known specimen encompasses individuals and institutions with resources sufficient to support virtually any price that the competitive process might generate. The gap between a 5-cent face value and a $400 million collector valuation is so enormous, so cosmically disproportionate, that it almost functions as a kind of philosophical statement about the nature of value itself, a reminder that value is never inherent in the material composition of an object, never fully contained in its weight or its metal content or its official designation, but is always and entirely a function of human meaning, human desire, human history, and the stories that communities construct around the objects they choose to treasure. The 2011 Jefferson Nickels, in its extraordinary compound error form, has become the object around which the Jefferson Nickels collecting community has constructed one of its most powerful and most enduring stories. A story about accident and discovery, about patience and recognition, about the beautiful democracy of a world in which genuine, life-changing treasure can be hiding in the most ordinary object imaginable, waiting for the person with the knowledge and the attention to find it. The emotional weight of this coin story goes beyond the numismatic and into the personal, because the $400 million value of the finest known 2011 Jefferson Nickels compound error specimen is not just a market figure. It is a testament to what dedicated, passionate, knowledgeable searching can find in a world that most people move through without ever really looking. The engineer-collector who found the first confirmed specimen was not a wealthy investor with access to privileged information. He was not a professional numismatist with institutional resources and specialized equipment. He was a person who loved coins, who learned everything he could about them, who developed his own analytical framework for understanding where extraordinary things might be hiding, and who applied that framework with the patient, systematic dedication of someone who genuinely believed in what he was doing even when the results were years in coming. His discovery is an argument, a $400 million argument, for the proposition that looking carefully at the world around you, really looking with knowledge and attention and the willingness to believe that extraordinary things can exist in ordinary places, is one of the most valuable skills a human being can possess. And so here we are, at the end of today's journey, having traveled from $170 million all the way to $400 million. Through 8 coins, 8 stories, 8 chapters of American minting history that each contained within them a reminder that the world is full of hidden value waiting to be recognized by those with the eyes to see it. The 2010D, the 2000P, the 1981P, the 1971D, the 1964, the 2002D, the 2016P, and now the magnificent, the extraordinary, the almost incomprehensible 2011 Jefferson Nickels, each one a monument to the beautiful unpredictability of mass production, each one a reminder that the distance between ordinary and extraordinary can be invisible to the casual eye and yet absolutely real and absolutely consequential to those who look more carefully. If today's video has given you anything beyond the entertainment, beyond the astonishment, beyond the satisfaction of a well-told story, I hope it has given you this. The next time you hold a coin in your hand, any coin, any denomination, any year, take one extra moment before you spend it. Look at it. Really look at it. Because somewhere out there, in someone's hand or jar or collection or forgotten roll of bank-wrapped nickels, the coins we talked about today are still waiting to be found. And the person who finds them could be anyone. Could be you. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the very end of the Value Vault. This has been the most extraordinary coin lineup we have ever assembled, and you deserved every single word of it.